Yeah, I think that's probably right, because uh, when somebody crosses the floor, as one of my colleagues did, that I think rather tends to cause people to rally round. I think it was a pretty bizarre thing to do, frankly, and I suspect that's just caused people to naturally want to rally to the colours a little bit, and it pushes people back into their normal political groupings, rather.
Well, there certainly seems to have been a shift overnight. You mentioned the Conservative MP, Christian Wakeford, crossing the floor. Do you think that this is because the Conservative Party has suddenly had the realisation that it's all benefiting Labour?
There's two things in it. Firstly, there's always the issue about, do you want to get into a situation where you give comfort to your political opponents? But there's actually a much bigger issue than that. That's not the calculation I think that most of us will ultimately make. It's what's right for the country. And when you get into these businesses of sort of tribal politics, which isn't really helpful when you're tackling with COVID and a vast of other things, then I think some people think that's rather a distraction. That, as far as many of us are concerned, what we need to see is what actually happened. Uh, were any rules broken? I've been very clear that if anybody broke the rules, then they have to pay the consequences for it. You can't have one rule for those who run the country and a different set of rules for everybody else. That's what I want to see, the report from Sue Gray, the senior civil servant who's looking at this, and then I'll take a decision on what's the right step then. I think some people thought people were getting in front of themselves until they'd seen the full information.
Do we really need an inquiry when the invitation said bring a bottle and it's all become a bit of a joke? And then, of course, how much faith do people have in that inquiry?
Well, I'm a lawyer, and I always work on the basis that I have the maximum possible evidence before I come to a conclusion. I think that's just prudent. There have been apologies. Of course, the Prime Minister had to apologise. It's absolutely unforgivable what his staff did. And at the very least, there's going to have to be, in my judgment, a complete clear out of the Downing Street operation, because clearly the culture was not acceptable and was ill-disciplined. Whether or not more is required, I'll pause judgment on until I've seen what Sue Gray says, what she says about any specific individuals, and what the response of any of those individuals is.
You say what's best for the country, but of course a lot of people will think it's what's best for the party.
Now, I think the key thing that we've got to do is to move out of the pandemic. There's actually, I think the other thing that's changed, Christine, is that a lot of the other evidence and other events are moving quite favourably. So that's, I think, why people are prepared to not rush to judgment on one issue and allow themselves, if you like, to be distracted from the really important issue of recovering from this dreadful couple of years that we've all been through.
The Conservative Party doesn't seem to have the stomach for a change of leadership, but of course people can be angry and this might splatter on your popularity.
Well, I think people are angry, and because we are the people in government, they're going to be angry at us. I think they'd be angry at any government if rules were seen to be broken by the people who are taking decisions. And so we do have to reflect on that. It's not the one issue. We don't operate in a system of single issue politics, thank heavens. So there are other issues. There's what's happening with the COVID vaccinations, and also the quite good news on the growth in the economy. That's very important. And of course, we've got other really important international issues. Obviously, from Gibraltar's point of view, you're in the middle of some important negotiations for your arrangements with the EU, even on an even bigger scale. We're at the real risk of the biggest military confrontation in Europe since the Second World War. So real likelihood, I fear, that Russia will invade Ukraine. Does one of the major NATO powers, one of the UN permanent members of the Security Council, one of the only two independent nuclear powers within Europe, do we really want to have a vacuum at the top of the leadership of the governing party at the moment that is happening? I think that's a serious question.